Hello again. I would like to welcome you all to our environmental security panel. As usual, the last panel after all these high politics things, it's usually considered as some low politics issue. But I don't know if we should be sorry about being on the last panel or should be happy about at least we could find a slot in this event. But before giving the word to our distinguished participants, we will have two presentations. I just want to say a few words about how this issue is important and how it is also perceived as something important. Last year I was a Mercator-IPC fellow here. We did a project on climate security perceptions in Turkey. We conducted a survey with 3,500 participants in Turkey that represents Turkish population. We also did interviews with Turkish parliament members and tried to see their climate security perceptions and sensitivities. And 64% of Turkish population thinks climate change is the most important problem of our time. And the percentage of climate skeptics, it's very low in Turkey. It's like only 1%. And 80% of Turkish population considers that Turkey is not doing enough to deal with climate change. And the parliament members also, they also share the same sensitivity, and they also think that both government party and opposition parties, parliament members, they think that climate change is an issue that they could easily cooperate to find solutions, to next steps. And they also stressed the Turkey's leadership potential in global environmental politics, particularly for the developing world, because there is this norm that there is this divide between developed countries and developing countries, and they say most of the, again, both governing party and opposition parliament members, they say that Turkey should have this leadership role for the developing world in global environmental politics. And as for NATO, it is also a very important topic. I think you all know this NATO's Science for Peace and Security program, NATO SPS program. And in this NATO SPS program, there are key priorities. And the first key priority is climate, environment, and security. And they try to analyze, try to see the approaches to reduce environmental impact of military activities. Of course, we are going to speak now about this, and disaster forecast and prevention of climate-related natural catastrophes. So it is important. Okay. Now let me briefly introduce our speakers. Firstly, our online participants is Ambassador Mithat Rende. He's a member of the board of Industrial Development Bank of Turkey. He served as an ambassador and permanent representative of Turkey to the OECD between 2013 and 2016. While in Paris, he also assumed the chairmanship of the executive committee of the OECD. Prior to his appointment, Ambassador Rende held the position of Director General for Multilateral Economic Affairs, responsible for global economic issues, energy, climate change, and environment at Ministry of Foreign Affairs between 2009 and 2013. During this period, that's important, he also worked as the Turkey's chief climate negotiator and member of the Turkish Nuclear Energy Commission. Between 2005 and 2008, he was chairman of the Trade and Transit Group of Energy Charter. Mr. Rende was appointed as Turkey's ambassador to Doha in Qatar in 2007. Earlier in his career, Ambassador Rende served as Turkish mission to NATO in Brussels and the OSCE in Vienna, and the Turkish embassies in Damascus, Rome, Sofia, and London. While in London, he also served as Deputy Permanent Representative of Turkey to the IMO, during which he dealt extensively with energy issues, law of the sea, maritime safety, and Turkish straits. Rende is a lecturer on geopolitics of energy and national security, diplomacy, and negotiations at Galatasaray University now. He has published in various journals. Ambassador Rende was awarded Sash of Merit by State of Qatar. And our second speaker, Ambassador Matthew Bryza, is the managing director of Straife, right? Okay. He currently serves on the boards of energy and telecommunications companies operating from the greater Caspian region to Texas. Ambassador Bryza is also a board member of the Jamestown Foundation, a think tank in Washington, D.C. He was formerly director of the International Center for Defense and Security in Tallinn, Estonia, where he founded the think tank's energy security and cybersecurity programs. In 2012, Matthew completed a 23-year career as U.S. diplomat, culminating as ambassador to Azerbaijan. Earlier, he served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of the State and Director on the National Security Council staff at the White House for U.S. relations with Turkey, Cyprus, Greece, Central Asia, and South Caucasus. From 1998 to 2001, Ambassador Bryza was the Deputy Special Advisor to the President and Secretary of the State on Caspian Basin energy security. Bryza also served in the U.S. mission to Russia and Poland. He is a frequent commentator on media outlets, including CNN International, Al Jazeera, the BBC, Fox News, Financial Times, Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and Chicago Tribune, as well as numerous outlets in Turkey and the South Caucasus. Matthew is the recipient of Estonia's Cross of Terra Mariana and Georgia's Order of St. George. Okay, let me give the word to Ambassador Mithat Rende.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Baysal, for your kind introduction and generous introduction. I thought you would read the short version of my biography, but sorry for the long one. First of all, I'm honored to be on the panel with my colleague, His Excellency Matt Bryza, an old friend. We worked together starting from the 90s. And it's great to see you, Matt.
You too.
Let me start by expressing my most sincere thanks to Istanbul Policy Center and NATO's relevant divisions for their kind invitation and for having organized this important event at a time of geopolitical uncertainties and historic developments such as the US elections, at a time of economic upheaval globally, in fact, and recession, and climate-related disasters, and also rivalries among regional and global powers. Let me also pay tribute to Professor Fuat Keyman, and offer my condolences to his family. He was a good friend. We will miss him. Dear friends and participants, this morning I had the pleasure of listening to my distinguished friends, Ambassadors Üzümcü, Duriyoz, and Ceylan, who discussed NATO's new 360 degrees comprehensive security approach, which naturally goes beyond the scope of the old narrow definition of security. In view of emerging global challenges and imminent threats, a broad definition of security, which covers, among other things, energy security of supplies, climate crisis, uncontrolled migration, destruction of energy, and defense infrastructures, should be taken into consideration while devising new strategies for NATO and other regional organizations, namely the European Union. So, yes, climate change, Dr. Baysal probably in his introductory remark rightly stated that the organizers tend to keep climate change and climate threat to the afternoon to sessions which are called the graveyard sessions. But still, I think when we finish with Matt and other friends, our conversation and this panel, probably our participants will come to understand that this is a serious issue, an important issue. Why climate change has been qualified as a national security threat? It was by the US administration, in fact. I recall that I was at COP26 in Glasgow when the President, Joseph Biden, stated that climate is an integral part of American foreign and security policy, defense policy, in fact. And then recently, the United States Secretary of Defense, a four-star general, Lloyd Austin, he stated that, and I quote, "We face all kinds of threats in our line of work, but few of them deserve to be existential. The climate crisis does." End of quote. And the reason is simple, dear friends. I took note of a few events. First of all, in 2013, Hurricane Sandy ravaged New York. Then in 2017, Morgan Stanley prepared an important report. And the conclusion was the 16 climate-related natural disasters did cost the American economy a great deal. The number was $306 billion. So it was the cost of 16 climate-related natural disasters cost 1/3 of Turkish GDP. And then in 2020, the then climate, let's say, guru Jim Carrey, he stated that the American economy's loss in 2020 out of the climate risks reached $200 billion. Then you might recall that in 2021, just three years ago, and Germany, the Netherlands, and Turkey were devastated by flash floods and wild forest fires. In fact, it took more than a week to put out almost 200 forest fires in Turkey. So then let me recall that in 2018, in the United States, again, Hurricane Michelle devastated Tyndall Air Force Base. And this is why, in fact, it is regarded that climate change is a threat to the defense infrastructure, to military personnel, to military installations in general, to our energy infrastructure and transport infrastructure, to our electricity grids, refineries, airports, air bases, naval bases, and so on. So for those who are interested in reading more, I would strongly recommend the book recently published by Sherry Goodman. It's called Threat Multiplier, Climate, Military Leadership and Global Security. So she was, I think, Deputy Secretary of Defense, who dealt with climate and environmental issues. She's very good at that. Now, at this point, I prepared a note because I'm sorry, it's for maybe you might recognize it, you might consider it as for beginners, but it's not, and I need to read it. So, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is a very popular group of scientists, climate crisis is one of the most threatening global challenges, and it is man-made. So some people might decide that it is God-given. It is man-made. In other words, it has been scientifically proven that it is the result of unsustainable human activities and the result of global warming. And global warming is real. The planet, dear friends, is already 1.2, and some argue that even 1.4 degrees centigrade warmer than the pre-industrial times. And this, unfortunately, climate crisis recognizes no borders, no country or continent. No one is immune. So we have to deal with it on a global level. So what do we need to do in order to avoid the catastrophic disasters? We should limit, the global warming should be limited to 1.5 degrees centigrade by the end of the century in order to fight climate change. To reach this internationally agreed target, we should meet the net zero emission 2050 commitment. This is another commitment made by over 136 countries worldwide. And the only way to achieve the set targets is to focus on decarbonization of our economies. And the energy generation and related activities. Let's face it, that I say it again, energy generation and related activities are responsible for more than 80% of the global emissions. So we have to deal with the energy issues. And the need for green, clean energy transition has become all the more important to deal with climate crisis. As I said already, it has been qualified as an existential threat. And why? Because we see it in the form of extreme weather conditions, hurricanes, typhoons in the Philippines, you might recall, and in Taiwan recently, 200 kilometers of speed of the wind, wild forest fires. And when we talk about wild forest fires, keep in mind the forest fires not only in Turkey, but also in Canada and also in Australia. The size of the forest fires in Canada reached the size of United Kingdom, I was told, or I read in one of the articles. Flash floods, and then we will talk about, of course, what happened recently in Europe, in Valencia and in Barcelona. The devastating flash floods, drought in Africa, melting Arctic, dear friends, and the rising sea levels, water scarcity, food shortage, extreme heat waves, destruction of energy and other delicate and vital infrastructure, as we said earlier, and uncontrolled migration. It is a serious security threat. So we talked about the Milton and Helena hurricanes in Florida and Carolina. Also, cities and townships were flattened almost. Hundreds of people lost their lives. Sherry Goodman argues that the American society is losing more people than against the threat of terrorism or sometimes even war. So it is a very serious issue. So what happened so far? Just to recall, and I will keep it short. We are running out of time, I think. The Paris Agreement. The 2015 Paris Agreement, I would like to recall that it represented a breakthrough in global efforts to fight climate crisis. We say climate crisis. We don't use climate change anymore. It is a serious crisis. This agreement was signed by 185 countries and the European Union. We can agree in general that in 2015, everybody acknowledged the need to be part of the solution in Paris. Developed, developing, and least developed countries agreed to make national commitments based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. It's very important. This is the basic principle of the process. So they will take commitments based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. I'm speaking slowly for the interpreters. I hope that the interpreters, because it is quite a technical issue, so the jargon can be heavy. But there is a need, dear friends, for more ambitious commitments and accelerated processes to keep the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees by the end of the century, thereby avoiding future devastating disasters. And meeting the net emission commitment by 2050 is another globally recognized target. Here, one more important point I would like to share with you, and that is climate commitments should be fair, transparent, and quantifiable to avoid politically motivated statements and greenwashing. When we deal with climate, greenwashing is another word which we should keep in mind. It is regrettable that many countries, fossil fuel producers, and exporters, including major energy companies, have been engaged in greenwashing to the detriment of our people and the future of our planet. Another development in this context has been the backsliding observed in climate commitments and the resistance by many countries to phase out fossil fuel subsidies, which I believe both are sine qua non, essential for fighting climate change and reaching the target net zero 2050. Fossil fuel subsidies, also we should keep in mind that the total fossil fuel subsidies reached $500 billion annually every year. So this has to be also phased out. Another undesired development, dear friends, would be maybe a decision by the new US administration to repeal IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, which would have global ramifications. Who knows, maybe they will also pull out once again from the historic Paris Agreement. And I hope they won't. They have to reconsider their position because if they are, they should keep in mind, in fact, that China represents a challenge for the United States in the field of energy, technologically, in the field of defense, in the field of technology, and green transition, or let's say the green technologies, as they constitute a big challenge for the United States. Probably the United States administration should be more forthcoming in the interest of their own people and the planet as a whole. So just to conclude, dear friends, those who are interested in deepening their knowledge in the field of climate change, climate risks, and the imminent threat, we should keep in mind that mitigation is important. Building resilient economies and infrastructure is more important, and phasing out coal is important. Unfortunately, we couldn't agree during the last COP, Conference of the Parties meetings, to phase out coal. They decided that we should phase down coal, which means very little. And financing green transition and and mitigation is important. So the developed economies, the developed countries should be more forthcoming. And I hope that COP29, which will be held in Baku, will deliver. I doubt it, but because of the fact that the oil companies, oil and gas companies, and the strong lobby, coal lobby, all together, they will be there and they will do their utmost to prevent more obligations and commitments by the developed world. But I hope that Baku can deliver what is expected from this COP29. Thank you very much, and I would be more than happy to answer your questions. Definitely, this is a very important issue, and it's not possible to address climate change in 20 minutes or 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rende, and thank you very much for summarizing this multidimensional security impact of climate change in this very short period of time. And let me give the word to Ambassador Bryza.
Thank you, Dr. Hussein. Thank you very much. Thanks for your introduction. Megan, thank you, and IPC for the honor of being here. I really love these discussions. Every time my mind stretches, and this is a topic that is very mind-stretching. Because of the impact. I mean, it is, as you were saying, truly an existential threat, that being climate change. But it's one that it's so wide-ranging. I mean, it's about changing the entire world that it's difficult to come up with a kind of a systematic and rational way to interlink all the NATO hardcore security threats or problems that emanate from climate change, but I'm going to try to do that, touch on a few of them. Great, 62% or 64%? 64% of Turkish people think that climate change is the #1 issue. Maybe the last thing I'll talk about is this unbelievable U.S. election outcome. But while in the United States, I mean, there's nowhere near that level of concern in the United States about climate change, of course. And we have a president, again, who doesn't believe that man-made climate change is real, right? He calls it the climate change hoax. So addressing my dear friend, Ambassador Rende's points and hope, and by the way, Ambassador Rende and I worked together for so many years and going way back, a lot of it on natural gas, which will be my next theme. I do think it's inevitable that President Trump is going to negate the Inflation Reduction Act. It's the biggest chunk of money ever allocated by any government organization, $450, I think it is, billion to fight climate change. And it's already attracted a few $100 billion of investment into the United States from foreign investors or international investors to begin these sorts of projects, whether it be critical raw materials processing or actual building the equipment, whether it be photovoltaic cells or all the various other pieces of equipment that is necessary for the green energy transition. And who knows what's going to happen. But I think that program is going to die. And we'll see different flows of investment. Just as an aside, I remember right after the Inflation Reduction Act passed, I was at our annual conference at the institute that, thank you, you mentioned I used to run in Tallinn, Estonia. And the Vice President of the European Commission, Vestager, was speaking, and I went up to her afterward. I said, actually, during the discussion, I said, so are you happy or unhappy that the United States government is finally doing what you want, right? Allocating huge, hundreds of billions of dollars or euros to fight climate change. And she was uncomfortable. She said, well, of course we're happy that's happening, but your industrial policy is making it harder for European companies to compete. So my last remark, I don't know if I'm going to get to it, but is that ultimately, I don't think it's up to energy companies to be the ones leading the charge on fighting climate change, because they exist to produce energy, to produce oil and gas. It's up to us, the consumers, to demand policy changes and to be willing to pay sometimes a higher price. When fuel subsidies, as Ambassador Rende mentioned, go away, consumers get angry. Right? Or if a national leader imposes a tax to discourage the use of fossil fuels, you get nationwide protests, as with Macron and France and the Yellow Vests. So ultimately, it really is up to us to demand that the right policies, regulations, and investments be put into place to get on track to prevent the global temperature from increasing by more than 1.5 degrees. And as Ambassador Rende said, we're already at 1.2 degrees, so it's, wow, we're not doing well. We've invested enormously, especially China, in renewable energy in recent years, especially in the last few years, but we're still consuming the same amount of fossil fuels because just our consumption of energy overall has increased so much, and it's going to increase even more. Our consumption of electricity is targeted to triple globally by the end of this decade because of AI. Where's that energy going to come from? Yeah, hopefully mostly renewable energy, but there's going to be a need for fossil fuels for a long, long time, unfortunately. So that gets to the discussion of natural gas and investment still. So this underlying theme is you have to choose what you invest in, but we're going to need natural gas for quite some time. I remember my first visit to Ankara in 1998. The air was just thick with brown smoke, right? Lignite, the dirtiest of the dirtiest fossil fuels. And of course, you'll remember, there were electricity outages throughout the day, and the air was filthy. And now, after decades of investing in natural gas-powered power plants, the air is clean. It's not a coincidence. Get the coal out of the mix, as Ambassador Rende was saying, and bring in, at least as a transition fuel, natural gas, and you get pretty quick results in cleaning up the air. Of course, natural gas is a fossil fuel. When it is emitted, it's 20 times or more harmful to the climate in terms of greenhouse gas emissions than is CO2, meaning methane. But if it's burned efficiently and isn't vented or isn't leaked from pipelines or in production, then it helps our economies get cleaner. As an example of that, so Germany did something great, in my humble opinion, with its Energiewende policies in the 70s and 80s, where the state invested a lot of money in developing renewable energy technologies. And thanks to that, we are where we are now, in many cases, in terms of advanced technologies for renewable energy. But something strange happened with regard to emissions. So we all remember the Kyoto Protocol back in 1998, was that? Yeah, 1998? Yeah, 98. Germany, of course, was really enthusiastic about it because it had been investing so much in renewable energy. The United States showed up but never committed to upholding its commitments under Kyoto, so never ratified it, never signed up. But then in the mid-2000s, especially after 2008, new US technologies for unlocking natural gas in sort of tight rock spaces took off, right? So there's hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling. And so quickly, the United States developed a massive supply of natural gas. It began converting most of its power plants from coal to natural gas. Coal became really cheap. Much of it got exported. Guess where it went? To Germany. So Germany ended up burning dirty US coal, ended up missing its Kyoto targets. But the United States, because it stopped burning its own coal and was burning its natural gas to generate lots more electricity, met its Kyoto Protocol targets without even trying. So there's a big debate out right now, some recent scientific papers saying, well, but natural gas, maybe it is harmful even when it's burned, but my own experience, whether it be in Ankara or the United States or Germany, shows that the shift from coal to natural gas really helps to clean up the air and helps resist climate change. But then natural gas brings a whole series of additional national security challenges. Ambassador Rende and I were working together years ago. I was out of government, he was in, but I had for years been interested in a possible natural gas pipeline from Israel to Turkey. And who knows, maybe that'll happen sometime, but the national security concerns, and especially the Greek Cypriots' refusal to bless such a pipeline, even though they don't have a legal right to block it, but that made it a practical impossibility for such a pipeline to happen because no banks, no European banks are going to finance a project that an EU member state doesn't want. So it never happened. And then in the Eastern Mediterranean, we've seen this interspersing of energy security, physical security, and then by extension, climate change because of the importance of natural gas as a cleaner energy source. So, of course, everybody here probably remembers in the summer of 2020 when tensions were so high between Turkey on the one hand, and Greece and Cyprus and France on the other hand. TPAO had sent exploration ships into the eastern Mediterranean, in some cases accompanied by Turkish naval vessels. There was an incident in the summer where a Turkish and a Greek naval ship collided, and then everything de-escalated. NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg and then Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, stepped in, and they negotiated or brokered a de-escalation. And since then, Turkey has been honest. It hasn't deployed any such exploration ships into the eastern Mediterranean. It's been looking for gas in the Black Sea. It's found a lot. Great. So Turkey doesn't get enough credit, I think, for having de-escalated it, and now it rightfully expects some reciprocity on the European side. But that's just an example of how physical security and energy transition and natural gas all came together. And of course, we've seen this most visibly in the way Russia has weaponized natural gas supplies. Of course, Europe surprised certainly me and many others in how quickly it's been able to wean itself from Russian natural gas now, whereas previously 40% of Europe's natural gas consumption or imports were from Russia. Now it's down to 15%, and they're going to go down another 15% this year. And back to Germany. Germany did an amazing job in developing very, very quickly 4 natural gas import terminals. Record time. It's the fastest anybody's developed that sort of capacity to import liquid natural gas. So Europe, great. It's moving away from natural gas, an important transition fuel, as a weapon that Russia can use against the European Union. And by 2027, says that it's not going to take any more, not allow imports of any more Russian gas, natural gas or oil. Seems good, right? And the U.S., my old friend, Assistant Secretary Jeff Pyatt, Assistant Secretary of State for Energy, is touting how much the U.S. and Turkey and Bulgaria, Romania have worked together to begin developing a vertical corridor to bring non-Russian gas into that region. The inconvenient truth, however, is Southeast Europe is totally flooded with Russian natural gas now. The molecules they made through a transaction say this gas belongs to somebody else. No, it's Russian gas. Just this week, Minister Bayraktar announced the hub, the Turkish natural gas trading hub. Great. BOTAŞ, okay, but in partnership with Gazprom. And Putin has wanted since way before even I was working with Ambassador Rende, since 1998, when Turkey and the US and Azerbaijan and Georgia were all trying to develop a network of east-west pipelines, including the South Caucasus natural gas pipeline that became TANAP and then the Southern Corridor. Putin, since he's been in office, has been trying to insert a bit of infrastructure where Russia can play a controlling or an outsized role that will make less strategically significant everything we've all done together on the east-west natural gas pipelines. And this is too much detail, but just if you're interested, I'll tell you more about the monopolization of gas flows from Turkey into Bulgaria, state-to-state actors, and when it gets on the Bulgarian side, it's very non-transparent. But that's, again, the point is the interplay of natural gas, politics, geopolitics, energy transition. For the energy shifting now, for transition and the energy transition, for it to work, we need equipment, as Ambassador Rende was talking about, much of which is produced in China, and we need critical raw materials, even more of which is produced in China. So just look at a couple of critical raw materials. Okay, rare earths. They're essential for all sorts of elements of the supply chain or the production chain for renewable energy, whether it be for magnets that are necessary in the turbines that generate electricity, or batteries, or whole sorts of ways you need rare earth metals. And they're called rare earths because they are geographically spread out, so it's rare to find a big deposit of them, and often difficult to reach places. In 1997, then leader of China Deng Xiaoping said, the Middle East may have oil and we have rare earths, and we're going to develop them into a strategic asset. 1997, and they did. And China now produces and processes 80% of the global supply of rare earths, 80%. A couple of other critical raw materials are, well, critical for the energy transition, cobalt and lithium. China doesn't really produce any cobalt, and it's like 60-70% is produced in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. But China processes 80% of cobalt. So the cobalt is mined in DRC, the ore is exported, very little no value added really for the DRC, which really could use some value added, sent to China, where it's processed and then exported to all of us to help with the green energy transition. That's a huge security dependence of the rest of us on China. Lithium, similarly. So China doesn't really mine any lithium, but 60% of lithium processing is done in China and by Chinese companies. So another aspect then of the intersection of climate change and NATO's interest and national security interest is this fact that the more we proceed with the energy transition, the more dependent we are on China, unless we invest, again, back to the leitmotif, invest more in processing and mining critical raw materials at home. The European Union has recently passed something called the Critical Raw Materials Act that aims to do exactly that, bring as much processing of these critical raw materials into the EU space. That's great. It's just in the early phases. There's a lot of that being talked about in the United States as well, and that's one of the underlying ideas, of course, of the Inflation Reduction Act, is to bring the production of the inputs and the equipment for the energy transition back to the United States. So I started with natural gas, right, and as a transition fuel. Now we're here talking about the more we do the green energy transition, the more dependent we are on China. We need these investments then at home, and especially here in Turkey. And maybe the penultimate topic, depending on how much you want to talk about the US elections, it could be the last topic. So let's say penultimate topic is interesting, to me, security, hardcore security threats that are surfacing, no pun intended, in some cases because of climate change. So one, Ambassador Rende already talked about melting ice in the Arctic. The good news is, as the ice melts, then there are new shipping lanes that are open, shorter distances from Europe and from Russia to China. Okay, so there's that security problem again as the ice melts. Russia has developed a couple of large LNG plants or production facilities in the Arctic. There's one, Yamal, and then there's Arctic LNG 2, which is even further north and east. And the U.S. has decided to kill that second project with an ever-evolving set of sanctions. And interestingly, with climate change, right now there's not enough ice-free time every year for it's Novatek, the Russian company, to export that LNG via sea to China. There are only a couple of months a year when you can go ice-free to China. China's the main market, China, Japan, and South Korea, but China's a big market for Russia's LNG. And so Novatek and Russia need ice-breaking LNG carriers, which exist. They've commissioned some at Novatek, they've paid for them, but the US has sanctioned those ships, and so as long as the ice remains frozen for longer into the year, Novatek won't be able to produce that LNG, and the US goal is to deny President Putin revenues to continue financing his war in Ukraine. And that's working. I mean, a week ago, Novatek announced they're shutting down production at Arctic LNG 2 for the rest of the year. So again, there's the interplay of security and the climate changing, and again, natural gas as a transition fuel. It all comes together with Arctic transit and production of liquid natural gas. And then finally, Central Asia and the Caspian region is one more area where we see the interspersing of climate change with security concerns and NATO concerns. As Ambassador Rende said, Azerbaijan is hosting COP29, begins next week. In fact, if any of you happen to come to Baku for that, I invite you, and please contact me, to a conference I'm co-organizing, my company, Straife, my consultancy, together with Ada University in Baku, and something called the Greater Caspian Association, which is a Geneva-based NGO, on environmental bridges to peace and prosperity. That's the title of it. Why that? This isn't just some empty grasping at straws to try to connect climate change and security. No, there's a really good news story about how climate change and peace maybe come together with Azerbaijan's selection as the chair of COP29. So a year ago, around now, it was time to choose who was going to be the chair of COP29. I forgot which country it was going to be chosen at the time, but Russia blocked it. And so Azerbaijan said, hey, well, we'd like to do this. But of course, Armenia said no. And so President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan worked out an agreement behind closed doors whereby Armenia would lift its veto on Azerbaijan hosting COP29 if Azerbaijan would lift its veto on Armenia being able to join the UN Climate Change Conference group. It sounds like a small thing, group for Eastern Europe rather than Asia. And Aliyev said, okay. So in a sort of a direct way, the mere existence of COP29 and then Azerbaijan's chairing of it energized the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and they have gotten closer and closer to a peace treaty. It looked a few months ago when we started organizing this conference like maybe the peace treaty could be signed during COP29 in Baku. Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan will be there. Now it looks like they're going to miss that target, but still, nonetheless, this global collaboration on fighting climate change has energized the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And finally, in the Central Asia area, there are tensions growing that lead to military clashes when it comes to water management and water sharing. We've already seen, and I guess it was last year, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan had armed clashes. Access to water resources was part of that. Right now, the Taliban regime in Kabul is diverting water from the Amu Darya River. That is really upsetting Uzbekistan. And tensions are growing between those two. They're not going to have armed clashes. And I think Uzbekistan has decided it needs a relatively stable Afghanistan to its south, but still, the tension over the management of these dwindling water resources is generating political and sometimes political military tension. And then finally, we see the decreasing level of the Caspian Sea. When I served at our embassy in Moscow, as you mentioned, thank you, and remember in 1996, the Caspian Sea was rising. And at that time, it was, nobody really understood why. Does it have to do with the moon or gravitational pull? But I remember a friend of mine in Dagestan, I say friend of mine with trepidation because that is a crazy region, Dagestan, they were building, the municipal authorities of Makhachkala were building barriers on the beach, big concrete barriers to hold the sea back. Now the sea's dropping. And it's because it's not. It's true there's less water flowing from the Volga into the Caspian Sea, which is why the sea level's going down. Why that's happening appears to be climate change. I mean, can't prove it, but it sure seems like it. And so that is leading to, not necessarily to military tensions, but significant economic difficulties, potentially, as Ambassador Rende was talking about, because ports may no longer be operable. You may not be able to build the jetty out far enough so that ships can operate. And a huge element of both fighting climate change, but also the geopolitics of reacting to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine is more transit through the so-called middle corridor across the Caspian Sea via green energy corridors. But if the Caspian Sea continues sinking too low, that won't be possible. So that's a sense just of how, and the last thing is on the Arctic. I remember when I was running that think tank in Estonia, one of our bright younger researchers said, let's do a paper on security aspects of the Arctic. I said, oh, terrific, let's do. And he wrote a first draft, and it was in a typical sort of Nordic way, positive, warm, optimistic. Let's use cooperation on the Arctic as a way to build understanding between Russia and NATO. And I said, okay, look at this report. This is something that's just come out from NATO saying how worried the alliance is about Russia militarizing the Arctic. So we had our best wishes that cooperating on fighting climate change would lead to some sort of understanding with Russia. Russia doesn't see it that way, but COP29 is an opportunity to use cooperation in fighting climate change to create regional stability, reduce tension, and hopefully help generate a peace agreement. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your mind-opening remarks that linked energy transition with geopolitics, security, and even peace.
Thank you.
And let me open the floor for questions.
May I add a few points before you open the floor, Dr. Baysal, please?
Of course.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Ambassador Bryza, for a stimulating contribution. A very very informative, in fact, and mind-blowing, I would say. The Arctic melting. You consider the rising sea levels as a positive development, but I think your administration is quite concerned about this rising sea level in the Atlantic because of the fact that Norfolk and Virginia Beach naval bases will suffer most, and they have to probably be relocated or maybe made more resilient. I agree with you that China is the green energy superpower. It is the new superpower, and I think the United States and the EU are quite behind. And if President Trump is to start backsliding in in your commitments, then you're going to face a serious challenge, because what you need now, in fact, is to add more financial means to the Inflation Reduction Act in order to fight, not to fight, but to compete with China. Again, Germany, you talked about Germany. It is admirable that they built for LNG reception facilities, energy terminals. But of course, the German economy, and especially the economy which is energy intensive, has lost its competitiveness because they are buying US LNG. But who profited here? It is the United States who profited from the situation, because now the German economy and Germany is more dependent on US LNG, basically. So I think if you talk to the German industry, the Ostpolitik, of course, they can't return to the old Ostpolitik, but they were able to buy cheap energy, pipeline gas and other and coal and oil from Russia, and sell equipment and components and cars and many other things. So it was like trying to integrate the economies. But of course, it is now a new. We have a new era, and the Germans have to deal with it, because it is really the Germans are suffering. The German industry is suffering from the new situation. So gas will remain with us. I agree with you, but without green transition and without the nuclear renaissance, which is expected, we cannot meet the international commitments, which is 1.5 and the net zero 2050. And if we can't meet, then we will have to face serious security threats as qualified by your people as existential. So maybe we should do more. But I agree that natural gas will continue to be for the decades to come with us. But we have to finance climate, and we have to finance green transition. And unfortunately, despite the fact that Turkey has meticulously devised energy strategies during the 90s when we worked together with you, and built the necessary infrastructure in the form of pipelines, Baku, Tiflis, Ceyhan, TANAP. We tried also the Trans-Caspian pipeline, and probably it has become all the more important to build the Trans-Caspian pipeline. We built FSRUs, we built reception facilities, and deep sea drilling capacity, and so on. But still, we need the support of the European Union and our other allies in order to fully tap the enormous green energy, renewable energy potential in the interest of both sides. Because I was invited by the German side, by one of the German think tanks to discuss the means of how to deal with energy cooperation between Turkey and Germany. And I was encouraged that the Germans are interested in receiving not only natural gas but also green hydrogen from Turkey, through Turkey and from Turkey. It was encouraging, and then I sensed the appetite to invest also I hope that the conducive environment, business environment, will be established in Turkey, so that we will encourage foreign investors to do business in the interest of all. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to do, Ambassador, just a quick follow-up, just to clarify. Okay. I was not, or I didn't intend to make the point that it's good that sea levels are rising. No, I was saying that it's creating a new problem for us in that it's deepening the opening of the northern route from Russia to China. It can be deepening dependencies between Russia and China on the energy transition. A good thing, though, we should highlight too how great Turkey has done in terms of installed renewable energy generating capacity. Right, it's number 5 now in Europe and number 11, I think, in the entire world. Wow, that's pretty good, just in the last few years.
But still, only 12% of our, only 12.5% of our wind capacity has been utilized. So imagine that our installed capacity is about, let's say, maybe by the end of the year it will be 115 gigawatt, and the total solar capacity of Turkey is around 400,000 megawatt, which is 400. So we still have to do a lot, in fact.
Let's start with Ambassador.
Thank you very much.
Mikrofon çalışmadı ama.
We can't hear him.
It's about energy security. Maybe it's about the battery. China.
No, maybe it's
Yeah, it's working. It's
Okay,
working.
now it's working. First of all, I would like to thank my 2 very good friends, Ambassador Bryza and Ambassador Rende, for their presentations. And I have a very naive question. You mentioned about green energy. Does it include solar? Because Germany has less exposure to sun compared to Turkey, but much more utilization of solar energy. And very briefly, is my understanding correct? And can there be, I mean, Turkey's advantage of being exposed more to sunshine be utilized? Sorry.
Yes, of course.
Let me collect Efif.
Yeah.
Okay. Please.
May I?
Oh.
Well, thank you very much indeed for these thought-provoking presentations by 2 colleagues, Ambassador Rende and Ambassador Bryza. I think there is one important aspect of this discussion missing in your presentations, and that's the nuclear energy based on modular and small reactors. Plus, could you please share your views on the future of fusion technology, and that could, change or alter the game in the energy field? Thank you.
Thank you. Should I, Dr. Baysal, or may I give a quick answer?
Açtık mı? We will collect a few questions and then we will answer them together, okay?
Okay. Well,
Please.
Okay. Heinrich Kraft, I used to be a German diplomat until September. 3 short questions and observation. The procession of rare earths is an ecological disaster. It's very messy. That's why it ended up in China, because environmental standards are lower in China than in Europe than in the US. So we need some innovation in order to bring it back to Europe or to the US if we do not want to lower our environmental standards. Second, gas in the Black Sea. Gas exploration by Turkey and by Romania is another country who has potential. Can it go forward under the current circumstances, having the war between Russia and Ukraine? And the third one is investment in renewables leads to a decentralization of energy. And this makes it much more resilient, also from a security point of view. We see this in Ukraine currently. If you have central networks, if you throw your missiles and bombs into the hubs, well, you can switch off the lights in big conglomerates. So there's also a security aspect to that.
Okay, maybe I should give word to participants, then we will get second round of questions. Okay, Ambassador Rende, you can start.
Thank you. First of all, my dear colleague Hussein asked about the solar capacity of Germany. You're right, Hussein Bey. It was Germany who started investing in solar and solar panels when solar energy was not that competitive. It was quite expensive, and Turkey had to wait until it was more competitive. I agree with you that they have limited hours of sun, and this is why they need base load capacity. In fact, Germany, it was a mistake, in my humble view, that Germany had to decommission their nuclear power stations, and they were not expecting at the same time to have no access to Russian gas. So they thought that Russian gas will continue to flow. Coal and oil will continue to flow from the east, and so I think Angela Merkel, under the pressure of the Greens, she decided to. It was a political decision, and she decided to decommission nuclear power plants, nuclear power stations, and then they had to burn more coal, unfortunately, because they were not prepared for this disastrous Ukrainian war. At this point in time, the Germans need baseload capacity. And how can you reach this baseload capacity? You should either do it through nuclear power stations or natural gas, or to burn more coal. So you need a baseload, because you cannot totally rely on wind. A few years ago, Denmark and Germany suffered from no wind for 9 days. The wind didn't blow. So they had to stop their wind farms. They were not they were not generating electricity. So you need a baseload capacity, and that is, for the time being, is available only through natural gas and coal, in the absence of nuclear power stations. As regards the SMR, the small modular reactors, I agree with you. That it is an important technology, a new technology, and it is also an affordable technology. We should also keep in mind that we are now having a nuclear renaissance. We started with a nuclear renaissance until 2011, and then with the Fukushima incident, it stopped, and now we can see another nuclear renaissance. And many countries globally are considering having more nuclear power stations, but SMRs are affordable, and you can build an SMR in a small to meet the needs of a township or a city, and you can realize it in 2 years' time, provided that you have the financing. I agree with as regards the IA, the data centers especially the American big companies are planning to build. They have difficulties now in the form of electricity. They don't have enough electricity to build data centers. So this is why, according to the Financial Times recently reported, that they are now considering building SMRs for their data centers. Fusion technology, yes, it would be a game changer, but still we're not there. then we would really phase out gas, maybe, including other fossil fuels. The Black Sea gas exploration, I think the Turkish side, by sending all their deep sea drilling vessels to the Black Sea, they were not expecting to strike a giant gas reserve, but they did. It's functioning, it's working in small quantities, though. But in the long run, maybe by 2030, at least one-fifth of the Turkish natural gas needs will be provided by the Sakarya natural gas field. Whether it is safe enough for the time being, it is probably the Russians. The Russians, for the time being, they are paying attention not to harm deep sea pipelines, gas pipelines. With respect to Turkey's Turkey becoming a natural gas trading hub, it will be quite. It will take some time because Gazprom is not being. They haven't been so generous as regards sending more volumes to Turkey, so that Turkey will be able to export additional volumes from Gazprom. Gazprom would like to sell every drop of gas and oil that they would like to market it. So the declarations on the Russian side were of political nature. I don't think that they are prepared at this point in time to send more volumes to Turkey to be exported to the Balkans and other countries. Thank you.
Couple of points, because thank you, Mithat. That was a comprehensive response. And Hussein, I mean, Excellency, you got his response. Another thing to keep in mind, though, is that wind power is great. I mean, the cost of building new onshore wind power generation and building it and operating it is now less than simply the operational cost of a traditional coal-fired power plant now. So that's how much efficiency there is in wind power, and offshore is coming in the same direction. But the challenge is, as Ambassador Rende was saying, is balancing the grid. It's not only that the sun doesn't shine all the time, like at night, or there's not wind sometimes, but think of like how amazing electricity networks are, like water. You flip the switch and you have to get exactly the right amount of electricity, the right voltage, the right power, the right volume at exactly that moment, and if it doesn't come, you think your world is ending. It's almost always there, and so to be able to have that balance, so that anywhere in the country you can do what I just said, you have to have constant supply of electricity feeding in just the right amount. And if you get too much wind and too much solar, that can mess up the grid and put it into disbalance and cause destruction of equipment, etc. So there are practical limits on how much of your installed capacity you can use, but the more, as Ambassador Rende was saying, base load you have, then the more of the installed capacity you can use. On SMRs, Your Excellency, I just didn't touch on it because I didn't know that NATO is really getting involved in SMRs, but of course they're really promising. As Ambassador Rende said, they're much more cost effective because you can manufacture them in a factory and then, as the name implies, modularly expand to get whatever generation capacity you use. The U.S. Department of Energy is promoting the proliferation of SMRs. There's a partnership in particular with the Texas-based company NewScale, and my old friend Justin Friedman, who used to be here at our embassy in Ankara in the political section, he's been part of that effort, and here also in Turkey, to try to come up with ways to launch an SMR project here. Who's ahead now on SMRs is Romania. They're really committed, their Atomic Energy Agency, to deploying what will be the first SMR project in the world. So the real downside with SMRs is the number of them deployed in the marketplace right now is zero. nowhere on earth. And nobody wants to go first as a private investor. That's always the case with new technologies, right? Private investors are afraid to be the first mover unless they see they can lock in some sort of monopolistic position, which is not the case for SMR. So there needs to be government help, and that's why the US government's involved, and hopefully Ankara and Washington can promote SMRs together and do a project here. Yeah, fusion, I mean, as the cliche goes, it's the solution to all of our energy problems, and it's just a decade away, and we've been saying that since, the 1950s. So but there was the first energy gain reaction, I think it was earlier this year. What month? Yeah, earlier this year, just for, microseconds, but more energy was released from the reaction than was put in. But the catch is, that doesn't include the energy that was used by the lasers that confine the stuff that gets fused. So technical way of saying we're getting close, but still not there, not sustainable. And a point really well taken on the processing of rare earths. Yeah, it's devastating, and that's why China does it, but we can't do the energy transition without them. So again, my key theme is we really need governmental and international organizational leadership to mobilize those investments and make the investments profitable for private investors, because you're going to need private capital to invest those trillions and trillions. And and Ambassador Rende was talking about U.S. naval bases and cities too that are now dealing with the effects of climate change. One of the primary goals of Azerbaijan in leading COP29 is to persuade the developed countries finally to create their fund that's supposed to have $100 billion per year put into it to help lesser developed countries manage these impacts of climate change. We've never even come close to 100 billion, not even 10 billion. So we won't get to 100 this time, but at least Azerbaijan's pushing it. Yeah?
Matt, it was 13.5 at the United Arab Emirates only so far.
Not even close.
No.
Server Hocam.
Thank you to both ambassadors for a fascinating panel. You refer to the geopolitics of climate crisis management, the political economy of political economy of crisis, climate crisis management. But as someone, when listening to the points were, by the way, very important, the points that you made. But as someone who's working on development from a gender perspective, because we're referring to a development problem here. Speaking of the missing dimensions of the debate here, again, gender is not there. No talk of it. The climate change, the climate crisis, is not gender neutral, but we don't see the discussion of the gendered effects and gendered drivers of the climate crisis that we're facing is not included in the policy debate at all. And this might be because of the limited representation of female leaders on the global level, global institutions. So I wanted to ask you again that simple but powerful question that I was referring to during my presentation. Where is woman in this process of our challenge, our crisis, climate crisis management process? Where is woman? Thank you.
May I answer? May I offer a short answer? Or
Hi, I'm owner Animer. I've recently started working as an analyst in the North American energy market, and we consult with clients whether they should buy energy now or not. So the question I want to ask is, what do you think will happen in terms of the sort of Euro-Atlantic overtures to the Caucasus and further to the east, right? Because if we're getting off Russian energy resources, unless we're getting, nuclear energy from Africa or building green energy in Europe itself, we're either going to be getting it from the east or from the west. And I looked at sort of the energy production of Azerbaijan, and I think if you took all the energy produced in Azerbaijan and sent it westward, I think it I might be wrong here, but it's like 40% of Turkish use. So Azerbaijan itself isn't really a solution. So that might mean you have to go further east to Turkmenistan. But on the other end, in North America, the LNG terminals and stuff like that, the hydrocarbons are very much at capacity, and they're building a lot of new ones. And then so they might be, but then that might increase the energy price in North America, and with the US election, I don't think that's necessarily going to be very happy. And by the way, US states have very, very serious, maybe even very ambitious energy targets, right? So energy, as a society, they might not necessarily appreciate it, but like Virginia has pretty big energy. So I'm just wondering how that will pan out, especially in terms of Turkey. Like, does that mean we're going to have a bigger drive towards the east, bigger engagement, or does that mean that we're going to fall back, not necessarily fall back, but concentrate on those transatlantic ties and tie in Europe energy-wise more to North America? Thank you.
Other questions? No? Why not? Okay, Ambassador Rende, you can.
Thank you. First of all, as regards the gender perspective, thank you for this. We overlooked this part of the climate crisis. I would suggest that you read. You may wish to read about climate justice. Climate justice covers, I think, gender issues also, because all vulnerable groups and vulnerable states are dealt with, and in this regard, inclusiveness is the right word. Inclusiveness. So inclusive and sustainable energy systems, building inclusive and sustainable, resilient energy systems. This is what, of course, not most of the countries, I would say. Of course, not the fossil fuel exporting. Not all fossil fuel exporting countries are keen to deal with the inclusiveness of building energy systems. But this is the climate justice is an important. I forgot to mention it also. It's an important aspect of dealing when you deal with climate change and try to mitigate climate change. As regards the second question, Nord energy markets, I agree that Azerbaijan doesn't have enough immense resources of energy, but still they are able to offer like 16 BCM per annum, which it's a good size, it's a good volume from Shah Deniz and other fields. But Turkmenistan is probably Turkmenistan is a huge resource for even for Europe. Maybe in the long run in the form of green hydrogen, but Turkmenistan needs political support. Turkmenistan is not in a position to engage in cooperation, in substantial cooperation with Turkey, Azerbaijan, and the West without having strong political support, and this was not available. We know that that President Putin hit hard on the head of the former president when he was interested in building bridges and sending gas to the West. But now the Chinese are also very keen to keep the Turkmen gas under their control. But still, I believe that we can continue to encourage the East-West energy flow. With respect to Americans' capacity to provide and to offer more natural gas to Europe, it is through the Atlantic, and then it is LNG. It is in the form of LNG, so you need to liquefy natural gas and ship it by quite expensive and complex container tankers, and then you arrive in Germany or in the Netherlands, and then you have to regasify it and feed it into the natural grids. So it's an expensive operation, and this is why the European industries are not competitive anymore. And also the LNG terminals in the southern part of the United States, they are also quite vulnerable to climate-related natural disasters. You might recall that some of the refineries and the energy installations, energy infrastructure suffered a lot from unexpected hurricanes and typhoons and so on.
Okay. Sure, yeah, on gender issues, yeah, good point. I'd like to hear more from you about it. But for me, this was a conference on NATO, and I was asked to talk about the security and the climate side. So that's what I focus on. But in my country, I mean, our Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, is a woman. She's leading the energy transition, part of it for the U.S. government. And here, one of Ambassador Rende's wonderful successors as Director General for Energy and other stuff is now Deputy Foreign Minister, Bryza. We've been working together since as long as I've known Hussein and Mithat even before, so a long, long time. But I'm not aware of whether or not there's a disproportionately smaller number of women involved in energy than in all the sectors of the economy, but you'll tell me afterward maybe. Thank you. As for supplies of natural gas, Turkey has been pushing or embracing, reaching out to Central Asia and the South Caucasus forever, since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that embrace or that outreach was a cornerstone of the strategic partnership, not only between the U.S. and Turkey back in the late 90s, but Israel too was part of that. And the idea was to move natural gas flows from a new basin that is not monopolized on transport by Russia, and especially for oil, doesn't have to face any geographic choke points like the Turkish Straits or Strait of Hormuz, or for natural gas, doesn't have to go through Gazprom's pipeline system. And as Ambassador Rende said, we all tried very hard to persuade Turkmenistan to export some of its gas to the West. The late president of Turkmenistan once said to my boss and me, he said, you know, President Putin tells me that, I can say this because the guy passed away, so it's okay. If we export our natural gas continually to Russia from Turkmenistan and don't send it west via Azerbaijan, your country will be stable, you will be a very wealthy man, and you will be safe. But if you do send your gas to the West, none of those will be true. So there's been a lot of intimidation on Turkmenistan. They're still trying to figure out how to monetize through exports their huge, fourth, I guess, largest supplies of natural gas in the world. A lot of it's going to be stranded as the energy transition goes forward. Some of it was making its way to Azerbaijan for a while through swaps, so some would go to northeastern Iran. And then Iran has gigantic natural gas fields in the Persian Gulf, right? It's South Pars, so in southwestern Iran. And there's a pipeline network that would then move that gas in a swapping arrangement up to Azerbaijan. The Turkmenistan has just quit doing that about a year ago. My friends at SOCAR are still trying to figure out why, but there are efforts to try to get that turned back on. But as Ambassador Rende said, and as you said, all of the energy that will come from Azerbaijan is not going to, well, I think it'll have a bigger impact than your statistic, but if 10 BCM are now going into the European Union, before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia was sending 155 billion cubic meters, right, to Europe. So the amount coming from Azerbaijan is small. And even if Azerbaijan were to reach its target that it agreed in July 2022 with the European Union, they have a strategic energy partnership agreement, right, to double the volumes to Europe. Even then, it would only be 20 BCM out of a former 155 BCM, though the European demand is decreasing. Azerbaijan won't reach that goal. There's not enough investment upstream to get the gas out of the ground. Eventually, Azerbaijan will produce more gas, but there's no chance they'll meet that doubling by 2027. And there hasn't been investment. One of the big reasons is that there are conflicting signals coming out of Brussels. Sometimes the European Union says we want twice as much gas coming from Azerbaijan, but then they say not for very long, right? And so maybe for 10 years, maybe 15 years, but if for a private investment in natural gas production and transit to be profitable or bankable, you need a 25 or 30-year project. And the European Union isn't ready to commit to that right now. So we're facing a strange dilemma. But the good news is, it doesn't matter. I mean, in Southeast Europe, having these diversified supplies, so non-Russian gas, has a big geopolitical impact. Even though the volumes are small vis-a-vis all of the EU, they're significant for Bulgaria, for Romania, and there needs to be so much more transparency and diversification of energy supplies into Bulgaria and Romania because of the Russian penetration beneath the surface. I mean, it's unbelievably corrupt in Bulgaria. I'm on the board of the biggest natural gas distribution company. I know, it's really corrupt. Not our company, though. We're trying to fight all this in trying to create transparency because we'll make more money. But my last remark is, it doesn't really matter where the molecules come from. It doesn't matter because the global natural gas markets are becoming more globalized. They're still segmented, right, geographically, because as Ambassador Rende said, if you either have to connect markets with supplies via pipelines which are expensive, take a while to build, or you have to liquefy the gas and put it on ships. That is economically viable and attractive. People are making billions of euros off of that trade now, but the prices are higher in East Asia than in Europe, so the gas right now, this year isn't going into this part of the world, it's going to South Korea and Japan and to China. But as there's more and more liquid natural gas, then there's more and more supply that doesn't have to go point to point from pipeline to pipeline, but can be traded like oil, right? Which is totally liquid, no pun intended. You can, you put oil on a tanker in point A and you can get it to point anywhere on Earth. And so that's the way the market's starting to evolve with natural gas. It's not there yet, but it's getting there. So at the end of the day, if you're like Shell is the biggest natural gas trader in the world, right? They don't care where their cargo comes from. They'll buy it wherever it may be in Qatar, and then they'll relabel it as, oh, this is now U.S. gas because they had a trading arrangement or a swapping arrangement with a U.S. company. Where the molecules come from doesn't matter. It's just that they're available in the market, and then the financial flows matter. And again, I alluded to this before, but when Russian natural gas, if it stops flowing at the end, well, in a month and a half, as it's supposed to, because the transit agreement with Ukraine is running out, Ukraine won't renew it, I don't think. So then there's no more Russian gas coming into the EU via this Ukraine pipeline, right? No. All of the molecules are going to be from Russia. They're just going to be called something else, like labeled Azerbaijani. But they physically come out of the ground in Russia. But the money flow will go to Azerbaijan. So drawing lines on maps now and having pipelines interconnected, we've gone through all that. The European Union did a great job, a really good job in interconnecting. And so now I think we can worry less about that physical pipeline infrastructure and should pay more attention to where do the financial flows go and are they going back to Russia. Thanks.
Ambassador Bryza encourages me to speak on different, you remind me missing points. The European Union Green Deal is the European Union Green Deal was introduced by Ursula von der Leyen as the new growth strategy of the European Union, and it is an ambitious program. And with the carbon footprint taxes, which will be introduced soon, we're going, not only us, Turkey, but many other countries will be in trouble exporting goods to the European Union. I understand that they are quite adamant to implement the Green Deal, all the regulations, and this is why they were not interested in concluding long-term natural gas contract, because they think that they will not need, in the long run, they will not need natural gas. It is maybe not that realistic, but at least Brussels is not willing to make such to sign contracts. This is the situation. We have to align. Turkey has to align its legal framework with that of the European Union. Otherwise, we would lose billions of euros in the form of carbon footprint tax. So this is another issue. Maybe it's not climate related, but of course it is energy related, and we need to decarbonize our economy also, especially the intensive energy sectors.
Okay, thank you for your remarks and thank you for the questions. And I just want to give the floor to Megan for concluding remarks.
Well, first off, thank you so much for coming, everyone. Our speakers, our guests, you really contributed so much to the quality of our event today. Thank you for being online with us, Ambassador Rende. We really appreciate you being online, our other speakers online, and our guests also online. Just a small housekeeping bit. We do have a survey that we will be sending all of our guests that is from NATO PDD. So if you could fill that out, that would be very appreciative, so we could maybe host more events like this at IPC with NATO PDD in the future. Also, I mean, we touched on a lot of overlapping topics with gender, climate, disinformation. Of course, IPC has work on all of these issues, so if you aren't following our other events and our other publications, please do. Please come to our mailing list. I was going to say like and subscribe, but you know, we also have YouTube, any social media you can imagine. And then also, of course, again, huge thank you to our team. You know, IPC has a very big network, but we're a small team, so couldn't have done it without all of them. Thank you to the caterers and the translators, who I now realize are talking very quickly because I'm forcing them to. So thank you so much again for your help. And then finally, of course, we need to thank Fuad Hoja, who really supported this project, and unfortunately, you all know, cannot be here today. So thank you so much. Thank you for your kind words about him all day, too, as well. So thank you, and that concludes our event. And we will also have a report that will be conceived out of the projects, or the sort of happenings here. So thank you again.
Thank you.